we're tackling a lot of questions about God, about misconceptions maybe that we have, about things that we're wrestling with, but we haven't talked a ton about Jesus himself and the claims that he made. And some of the things that are a bit controversial. Jesus made a lot of claims that were pretty bold. And there was a reason that people had a lot of issues then in scripture with the things that Jesus said, and that there's a reason that people still have issues with it now and today. So today we're going to discuss some of those questions that we may have based on what whether we've been told these things about Jesus or we've read it in the Bible and we've wondered. It's caused us to stop and say, what? I wonder what that means. Or, man, I don't know that I agree with that. So today's question is Jesus really the way, the truth, and the life? That is a bold claim that Jesus said. No other person in the history of the world has ever claimed to be the way and the truth and the life. And Jesus does make this big, bold claim, and he just pissed a lot of people off when he said it, because you have all these Pharisees and religious people and people who knew scripture inside and out, and they could not believe that someone would claim to be that, because they did not see Jesus as God in that moment he said it. So it's found in John 14:6, where he says, I'm the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And the heaviness of that statement sparks that curiosity in us.
I think that the biggest part about it is it feels so definitive. And I think that that has been really challenging for a lot of people to say, well, it just feels so like you're in or you're out kind of thing. It's me or nothing kind of thing.
Yeah, totally.
And I, know, like just talking to a lot of people, that's been a challenge. I think that sometimes statements like, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, the only way to the Father is through me, becomes extremely controversial, especially for younger people, because it makes it feel like you're in or you're out. That if you don't believe in this, then you're automatically out, or things like that. And I think that's been, like, for me, and why I think this question is so important to talk about, like what it actually means, and really like unpack the context in which it was spoken, unpack each of those words, and more deliberately, is important, because otherwise, if left to individual interpretation, a lot of us can look at it a different way. And a lot of people have become offended by it. And a lot of people have weaponized it. Let me be honest with that too. So
Sure.
I think that this question about, yes, we talk about the way Jesus lived his life and his teachings and how we should follow him and all of this. But I think when we talk about like the I am statements, and this one specifically, it's so important, because this arguably is one of the ones that can be like the splitting of hairs that cause people to like say, nah, no thanks. I don't want to be a part of that. You guys are too exclusive, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's actually not what Jesus was saying. Like, that's the other thing, right? Like, it actually is probably one of the most inclusive statements, but if interpreted correctly.
And I would say that interpreted correctly is always the key, right? And who knows if we're always interpreting scripture correctly. That's the whole brunt of this. Brunt is the wrong word, but the whole like holistic view of this podcast has been like, hey, we may be getting it wrong. Like as followers of Christ, we may be getting it wrong, but if we stay curious, we do believe that God can reveal things to us, and context matters. So those two things go hand in hand, right? Like there's the Spirit that reveals things to us, and then there's understanding context, and somewhere in the middle, we're never going to become all knowing. We're going to be left with questions, but maybe we could understand the heart of God a little bit more if we stay curious versus if we get set in our ways. So with that said, when we hear I am statements, it's always going to be controversial. The reason it's controversial is because for someone to say I could be the way or a way, those are two different statements. To be the is absolute, to be a is an option. We do believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and life, but let's break this down a little bit, right? Because it isn't meant to be an exclusive. It's not meant to be exclusive language. It's actually very inclusive language, but it's all how we interpret it and how we look at it, right? So if we take the way, which, and I want to preface this by saying we're going to dive in a little bit to the context of this verse because I think it changes everything. But I think I want to do this opposite today and like address the ways that 99% of us interpret this verse. And then after we break that down, we'll get into the context of it. So we look at the way. I would argue that might be the most controversial of the statements, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the question might be, well, don't all paths lead to God? So the way feels very like, because if Jesus is the way, then you're basically, that does feel exclusive. And it is saying that there's that Christianity is an exclusive religion. But Jesus, who's not a religion, he's relationship, right? He in this verse is actually presenting it as a pathway to a relationship with God. He's saying, like, hey, I am modeling for you a life of love, of humility, of life to the full, and I'm showing you the way that you can live life to the full. So I like to think of it as like a person who you've never learned how to ride a bike, and this person, this is a dumb analogy, but here comes Aaron's analogies, right? Like a person who's never ridden a bike, and it's a person saying like, hey, I will show you how to do that, and I'll show you how to do it really effectively so that you don't get hurt in the way that you do it. If you think about it in that context, it's like, oh, well, it's not an abusive thing. It's not him saying like, I'm the way, you better recognize it, you better listen. That's not actually the posture of God at all. He's actually saying, hey, can I offer you a way that you're actually going to find life and life to the full? I'm offering you the way. And it is the ultimate way because I'm telling you, there isn't another way for you to find this kind of fulfillment that you're looking for. You might go out and search for it, but you're not going to find it in the same way of what I'm offering to you.
Yeah, I agree that the way is the hardest part, right? The life and the truth, like, right? It's clear he lived. There's evidence of it. Like the way he lived his life could serve as a model for us. It's what we talk about in his teachings and the words he spoke. It's why we read the Bible. Like that is it. The truth, yeah, I think some people struggle with that. But the way is the hardest part. And I think to your point, like just to back up for a second, the I am statements are controversial because if we remember like why Jesus even was crucified, it wasn't because of performing a miracle. It wasn't because of disobeying the law. It wasn't. And it was because of his I am statements,
Yeah.
right? Like it was because of the identity that he claimed. So anytime we come to these, I think there's 7 I am statements in the gospels where we really hear Jesus speaking about I am. I think it's 7 total. Like those I am statements have become so widely debated, so widely studied, so widely controversial in a lot of ways because they are identity markers. And the identity that Jesus had was so contrary, although he looked like man, to the way we live on earth, that it was really hard for people, especially those that were so hell-bent on the law, to understand those. And so I think one, like I am statements are already hard, but I think to your point, and I love how you put this about like the absolute of the way is really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the way is really difficult because the best I can put it is like we can look at the life, we can maybe say, okay, the truth we can get down with, but the way, like how many of us really want to sign up to live the way? How many of us want to sign up to be like, oh, Jesus is the only way to the Father? It's the only way we get there. I think where a lot of us struggle is that we want to put it on ourselves. If I do good deeds, if I am a good person, if I'm kind, if I read my Bible, if I pray or whatever. And I think even Jesus saying the way, it took ownership from us being able to have any power over whether or not we get to heaven or know the Father or what happens, so on and so forth in eternity. But I think that like it took a lot of ownership off of us as humans. And Jesus said, no, there's one thing only. Like it's really simple. And it does sound really simple, but it's actually really hard and really complex. Outside of believing and having faith, we can't pat ourselves on the back and say, oh, I earned this, or I deserve this, or I can get there. And so I think that becomes a really, really interesting challenge with the way specifically, because it's like, nope, he's like, I already did it. There's there's nothing you have to do but believe. Like, I've earned it. I've created that bridge. I've created the pathway to the Father. You come to him through me, through belief that my life, my death, and my resurrection are in service of reconciling your relationship with God, is in service of restoring what was broken in the garden.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else. There's nothing we can control, manipulate, do, believe that could
Yeah.
earn us into that space. And so I think sometimes in our own, like we've talked about in previous episodes, our own egocentric, us putting ourselves as gods on our own throne, I think we struggle with that. And I think we have gotten to a point where we are treating our faith like it's a plate at a buffet. And we're picking the parts that feel good and the parts that we want, and we're putting them on our plate and we're making it up. And then to hear Jesus is the only way.
Right.
And if that's not on our plate, or that might be, hey, we only got one of those,
Yep.
but we filled up our plate with all this other stuff, but we just invited a little piece of that in. We're putting our hope and our trust in other places and other things, and we're
Right.
not actually like pursuing the way that we like see here in what Jesus said as the way, the path to heaven, the path to God, the path to eternity, right? And so I think that I love what you say on this journey of seeking who we are, why we were created, the way that we should live, what we were created for, our own identity, our own way, our own path. As young people, like, it is so easy to get distracted by all the other available options, and then to say, oh, you're telling me that because all these other options are on my plate, that that's not good enough. And
Mm.
that can be a really hard pill to swallow. And it can really make people turned off to Christianity. Like we've been talking about, it makes it feel so exclusive of like, oh, you dabble in that other stuff, you can't sit with us. You're not welcome here. And I would argue that, like, understandably so, because that's not what Jesus said, nor is that what he meant when he
Right.
said it, which we can talk about a little bit further, because I do think it's worth addressing, because we could dabble in those things all day. They will be fleeting. They will come up empty. But I think that it just makes people feel like there's an exclusivity to
Yeah.
this. And that if I don't do it the way God said, and we
Yeah.
live in this world where we want to be autonomous, and don't tell me what to do. Like, you can't put baby in a corner.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but like, kind of thing. Like, we vie for control and autonomy and all this other stuff. And then to say, oh no, there's only one way. So you either get down or not. Like, I could feel like people are like, oh, that religion, that faith, that is so manipulative and things like that. And that starts to become the thing that turns people off. And
Mm.
so it's like going back to, if you only understood, it wasn't exclusive. It was clear direction, I believe. And it was actually an invitation for all. So while it can be seen as exclusive, I personally think it's actually the most inclusive. It's like there's no hidden secrets. There's no counting anybody out. It is freely available to all. Like, I am literally giving you the blueprint, the game plan, the playbook, or if you will, to say, here's how you get to, here's what you got to do to get down. And it's like, it was like, all are welcome, all can come sit at the table, all can access this. It is freely given. It will not be forced. It is freely given. But in that freely given, because it's just one way, because it's like, no, that's it. Like, it has turned people off to be like, oh, that feels really exclusive, and it feels really suffocating, and it feels really manipulative, and it feels all of these things that I've heard, as that's just not the type of faith I'd want to live in. And I think it's worth, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. maybe even a little bit more because you've definitely been around it and probably heard way more and seen way more of like how that has been weaponized.
What I would say and what I have said in the past and what I would say to it now as we wrestle with that question of there being one way to the Father through Jesus is that one, it's not exclusive, but two, that we're all on our own journey and we're all on our own path of discovering who God is. And there at some point in time within Western Christianity, it has become we have to scare people into relationship with God. We have to tell them it's the turn or burn theology that I think a lot of millennials and generations older have deconstructed from, have walked away from, because it was a scare tactic that scared them into relationship with God. And the older that I've gotten, not as a boomer, but as a millennial, just to be clear what generation I am in, is that if I would have read this verse with the heart of God as Aaron, you are going to go on a journey of your life to figure out a way to find fulfillment and purpose and life and what is true and what is not. And you are going to wrestle with that the rest of your life. And I am telling you that in relationship with me, I promise you, I will help you discover those things. That message is the heart of God, that I will help you discover life and life abundantly. Not, well, Jesus is the way and the truth of life, and no one comes to the Father except through him. And if you don't get this, you're going to hell. But that was the message that was taught for lots and lots and lots of generations. And that is where it was weaponized. That is where it was painful. That's just a taste of what's waiting in the full episode. Want more?
Head over to Come.Union.substack.com. It's free, and it's where we drop all the good stuff. Full episodes, bonus thoughts, and some behind the scenes real talk.
Hit the subscribe button here too so you can stay in the loop. We'll meet you over on Substack.